I mentioned that I work with a charity called Hope for Justice, and we are currently working with employers, big employers like Marks and Spencer's and John Lewis and all the big firms, the big shops, because very often they will not know who the people they are trading with employ. Just at the beginning of last year, our charity rescued 17 men from a warehouse that was making beds for two of the biggest retailers in the UK, Next and John Lewis. And these 17 men were trafficked and living in the most appalling conditions. Now, John Lewis and Next did not know these men were trafficked. They weren't dealing with the men. They were dealing with the person who trafficked them. So it was like an agency. So we do have a big problem with supply chains, and we are trying to educate people to buy from reliable sources where we know that there are no trafficked victims in that supply chain. So forced labour, we have people working in agriculture, the food industry, the construction industry. Cannabis farming is a big, big issue. We very often get particularly boys from Vietnam and China being trafficked into different countries, into the UK, into America, into Norway, lots of different countries, and they will work in a cannabis farm which is hidden in a house. They will live in the cannabis farm, they will eat in the cannabis farm, they will sleep there, they will never come out of there. So you can imagine the health problems that causes when people are breathing that the cannabis fumes all the time. Car washes are also a big problem, particularly in the UK at the moment. We've got a big problem with car washes, and we have just in the last few months launched an app for your phone that actually, it's called Safe Car Wash, and you can actually report if you think there are trafficked people in a car wash, then you can report it straight from this app on your phone. Car washes are big, big business for traffickers. We've just had one shut down in the city where I live, and there were 7 young lads working in there, and they were all trafficked. The problem is that they don't realise they've been trafficked because they are being paid. If you are from a village, a little tiny village, way out in outback Cambodia or Vietnam, and somebody comes to you and says, I will pay you £5 for 6 months' work, 5 English pounds, they think that's a fortune. In the UK, it's actually against the law. But lots and lots of... The trouble is that the police raid the cannabis farms, they arrest the people who are working in the cannabis farms, and then they are jailed for however long. They come out of jail and they are exploited straight away again. In the UK, our police are being educated that actually if they see young men in these cannabis farms, more likely than not, they will have been trafficked. Domestic servitude. Lots of domestic workers working in lots of different homes, and I think this is an abuse of an African tradition in some African countries where girls are sent to work in homes. I also am involved with another charity that works with trafficked children, and we had a 13-year-old girl who had been trafficked to work in a home. And she looked after the children, she did all the housework, she made all the meals. She was there. People from the neighbourhood would bring their children for her to look after. When she'd been there a few days, and remember she's 13 years old, when she'd been there a few days, the father of the house came and raped her, and then he started bringing his friends in to actually have sex with her. At 13. When she tried to escape, the woman of the house said to her, you cannot escape because I will kill you. If I kill you, nobody will mind because nobody knows you're here. If you escape, the police will bring you straight back to me because I own the country. If you are a little girl, frightened and terrified, and you are from a little tiny village with no education, you don't know anything about the world, why would you not believe that woman? She believed her. She believed she owned the country. We did actually manage to rescue her, but it's domestic servitude. We actually had a politician in the UK a few years ago who was actually prosecuted for having a girl in her house, a slave girl, working all hours, and that girl was trafficked as well. So they might be citizens of any country. They might be undocumented immigrants or foreign nationals with specific visa types. Mostly foreign women and girls with or without documentation, but men or boys may also be victims. We've had a case recently in the UK where a young man with severe mental health problems was being forced to work in domestic servitude in a house. So they target the vulnerable. Sexual exploitation, I think this is the one that most people think about when they think about trafficking. It is a big issue, but it's very, very hidden. In the UK, we have more statistics about forced labour than we do about sexual exploitation. But we also have, and I think they occur in many countries, we have what we call pop-up brothels. So a brothel will happen in a house and they might have 2 or 3 girls, but before the police can find it, it'll close down and it will pop up somewhere else. So we have a big problem with pop-up brothels. Nail bars, ladies and gentlemen too, if you have your nails done. If you have your nails done, make sure the people that are doing your nails aren't trafficked. Many, many, many nail bars have trafficked victims in them. They will work doing nails during the day and they will then work as prostitutes at night. And there's usually somebody controlling them, so there will be somebody sitting in the shop making sure that they just do what they're supposed to be doing without telling anybody else. We have girls, particularly in pornography, and children. It says here children trafficked for other reasons, but actually it's anybody trafficked for other reasons is subject very often to sexual exploitation. I can remember, because this is my passion, what my husband doesn't know about trafficking isn't worth knowing, because I bang on about it all the time. And I can remember him saying to me, why don't they just escape? There is a film, and I think it's on Netflix, called The Whistleblower, with Rachel Weisz in it. And it's based on a true story, and it tells the story of an FBI agent who is seconded to work with the UN in Europe. And she uncovers a trafficking ring. And these girls are trafficked, and she actually helps one of them escape. But the traffickers actually get her back. And I'm not going to tell you what they do to her because it's absolutely horrendous. But what they do to her, they do in front of the other girls, which, if you see what they do to her, no other girl would try and escape. And then they kill her. But at the end of the film, you actually see who was doing the trafficking. And it was actually officials from the UN who were actually running the trafficking ring themselves. So, and a British firm. So, high places, there are traffickers. As I said, I work with a charity called Hope for Justice, and we work in many countries. I'll tell you about the countries in a few minutes. But this is a picture of 2 little Vietnamese girls, one as young as 8, and they are in Cambodia, and they are waiting for punters. They are waiting for men to come and have sex with them. That little girl there in the purple and white is 8 years old, and she is waiting for men to come and have sex with her. So fraud is also a big problem. We have a big problem with the traveller community in the UK who adopt babies, and then they will claim child benefit, because in the UK we have a system called child benefit, and they will claim this child benefit, then they will sell the baby onto another family who will then claim child benefit. They will sell the baby onto another family who will then claim child benefit. They are passed around various communities and they are bought illegally. And very often they come from baby factories in Africa, in Nigeria particularly. There are where traffickers will either take pregnant young girls off the streets, or they will impregnate girls. They will keep them locked in a house, and the baby will be delivered, and then the baby will be sold. If the baby is lucky, and I say that in inverted commas, if the baby is lucky, the baby will be sold to a couple who really, really want a baby and cannot get a baby any other way. And you quite often see in the press that American couples have gone to Africa, or British couples have gone to Africa and adopted a baby. The second reason that babies are sold is for fraud, for claiming benefits. But unfortunately, the third reason is for ritual abuse. So they will be used in witchcraft ceremonies. And babies, children, are seen as a commodity. They are really, really vulnerable to abuse. Organ harvesting is becoming an increasing problem. As far as I know, we've only had 2 cases in the UK, and I've never been to India, and I've never been to China, but I am told that in India there are posters on the wall saying if you want to sell a kidney, if you want to sell whatever, an organ, then we will buy it off you. There was a case a couple of years ago in China where a 17-year-old boy, as far as his mum knew, he'd been on holiday with his friends, and he came back and he was quite poorly. And he was so poorly that she took him to the hospital. And the hospital came out to her and said, "What operation has he just had?" And she said, "He hasn't had an operation. He had a scar from his sternum right round, right up his back. He had sold a kidney because he wanted a new laptop." And there are corrupt surgeons, there are corrupt midwives and corrupt nurses. You may not believe it, but there are. And they gain a lot of money. Very often they will say, particularly in China, you might have, say the surgeon will say you need your appendix out. So you'll go under the anaesthetic, you'll have your appendix out, but at the same time, you never know about it until you're ill, if you ever become ill. So there's a real lot of corruption in this. As you can see, this is big business. So for instance, a kidney could earn the person $62,000. So it is really big business, and it's something that we need to watch out for. Big business in China. In China, there is a peaceful movement against the communist government called the Falun Gong. And the Falun Gong do peaceful demonstrations, etc. But the government will very often put them into jail, and there's a lot of research about this on the around. You can see it on the internet. That the government will then, and the prison officers will, if somebody needs a kidney, they will just take a kidney from one of the Falun Gong members. If somebody needs a liver, they will just take the liver. If somebody needs a heart, they will just take the heart. If somebody needs eyes or corneas, then they will take the eyes. So you can see it's a really nasty, nasty, nasty business, but it is big business. Brings a lot of money in for the traffickers. So Juju, some of you may know about Juju. I'm sure some of you will know more about it than I do. But it's the traditional belief in the spirit world and how the gods affect the activities of everyday life. So particularly in Edo and Delta states in Nigeria, there is a big problem with girls being trafficked out of the states for sexual exploitation, particularly in Europe. Italy particularly, but very often in other countries, and it is becoming bigger and bigger business because it's a very, very effective way for traffickers to control people. Because the trafficker can be at the other side of the world, but the girl who is being trafficked will not say she's being trafficked or identify her trafficker because she is so frightened of these spirits. What happens is there are the living dead spirits. Sorry, I keep turning my head away from the microphone, don't I? The living dead spirits are the spirits of people who have died that we can remember. And they are the good spirits. They are the ones that are like guardian angels. So they look after you. They will help you get what you want. The dead spirits are the spirits that are terrifying to these girls. And they are the ones that are people who have died long ago, ancestors who've died long ago, who nobody alive today can remember. And that makes them very, very dangerous. And what they do is, if you make an oath with one of these spirits, then you break that oath, and that spirit will come to you in the night, give you nightmares, even kill you, give you bad disease. And what happens is the trafficker will take the girl to a Juju priest, and they will do a Juju ceremony, which Juju ceremonies differ in various parts. But basically what the Juju priest will do is he will take some head hair, some pubic hair, any hair. He will take the girl's underwear. He will put it in a jar and put it in the Juju shrine. He will then take some soot and do an incantation over the soot. Sometimes he'll use the cockerel's blood. Sometimes the girl is made to drink the blood or eat the heart of the cockerel. And the Juju priest will do an incantation over the soot, inviting this dead spirit to go into the soot. He will then make cuts on the girl, usually 3 straight lines. So if you see 3 straight lines while you are nursing, then just be aware. Very often it will be 3 straight lines, and he will rub the soot into these lines. That is the spirit entering the girl's body. The girl then sincerely believes that dead spirit is in her body, and if she doesn't obey, then he will really give her bad nightmares or whatever. And they really believe that if you die in your sleep, it's because a dead spirit has taken you. The girl is then made to swear an oath to the trafficker, and if she ever breaks that oath, then that is when the dead spirit will act. So we've had cases in the UK. We had one case where a girl was brought into the train station and sent up to Glasgow in Scotland, and she was told what to say, and she went to the housing officer and said, "I'm a refugee, I want to claim refugee status." And he said, "Right, while we investigate, we'll put you in this flat." She went into the flat, and she was told by the trafficker to go out as a prostitute. The trafficker told her where to go. Unfortunately, or fortunately, a few weeks later, another girl was brought in and sent up to Glasgow, and she saw the same housing officer, and she had exactly, word for word, the same story. That housing officer had been on some trafficking training and recognised the story and thought that these girls were probably trafficked. The police then did an undercover surveillance operation, took lots of photographs, and one night when the girls were out on the streets, they arrested them for soliciting. They took the girls to the police station and showed them photographs of them with their trafficker. These girls were so terrified that they refused to even see that there was a man on the picture. They absolutely refused. So very often we have to get a Juju priest to reverse the spell, to reverse the process before girls will cooperate with police inquiries and with the criminal justice system. So I'm just going to run through the signs, spotting the signs. I'm sorry it's not been a proper workshop, but as I said, we've had to hurry because we were late coming in. So, recognising the signs. I have here, somewhere, if anybody would like to take one afterwards. These are Hope for Justice leaflets, and they have an overview of modern slavery or human trafficking, and they have a list of the signs. So if anybody would like to take one afterwards, I'll leave them on this table, and you can just come and take one. So trafficking victims are often lured into another country by false promises, and they will not easily trust others. We've said that. They'll be fearful of police authorities, be fearful of the trafficker, believing their lives or their family members' lives are at risk if they escape, And very often traffickers will say to a victim, if you try and escape, I will go and get your little sister, and I will rape your little sister, and I will sexually abuse her, and I will use her as a prostitute. So if it's between you and your little sister, what are you going to do? You're not going to try and escape. Very often they'll say, if you try and escape, we will go and slit your mother's throat. It's just horrendous what they do, what they say to them. They might exhibit signs of physical and psychological abuse and trauma, for instance, anxiety, lack of memory of events, bruising, untreated conditions. Very often they will have untreated conditions. We had a case in the UK only a couple of years ago where a man with very limited mental capacity was trafficked. This man, the trafficker actually got to know this man and got to know his family, and he said to this man's family, look, I can take him and I can give him a job. And he took him down to a stud farm, and actually it was Wales again, but he took him to this stud farm. He was a traveller family or gypsy family, and they abused this man terribly. They used to put him in the stud yard where the horses were. And you know what power washers are, where you really powerfully wash a car with those machines? They would power wash him with 5 power washers at the same time, just for a laugh. One day that wasn't enough, so they put him on the back of an unbroken horse, and of course he fell off, broke his femur, and they gave him an upside-down broom to use as a crutch. He had to carry on working with a broken femur. The men then went off to Ireland to buy some horses, and the girl from the family was really quite upset about this man, so she took him to hospital. He was admitted to hospital, and his femur was pinned, and he was fine. He had really, really rotten teeth, which is a real big sign. His hair was falling out. He was very dirty and unkempt. He was very, very frightened, and the nurses did not recognise that there was something wrong. The traffickers came back from Ireland. They were angry that he was in hospital. They went to the hospital and they made him discharge himself, still with the staples in his leg, and they took him back and put him back to work. He was rescued, but it just shows you that actually nurses are in a prime position to recognise human trafficking. So they'd be fearful of telling others about the situation. I think they're just doing a bad job, like the boys I was talking about in the cannabis farms. They might have limited freedom of movement, be unpaid or paid very little, have limited access to medical care, seem to be in debt to someone, which we talked about, have no passport or mention that someone else is holding the passport, which again we talked about, be regularly moved to avoid detection or be controlled by the use of witchcraft, e.g. Juju. So all these signs are signs that somebody may have been trafficked. I think probably the biggest one that is available to us straight away when we meet somebody is, if they're from another country, have you got a passport? Is somebody else holding your passport? It's like domestic violence. They will go to the doctors and the trafficker will always be with them. They will not leave them. The abuser will always be with them. And they will probably not come to the hospital until they are very ill. We've had a child who had a massive tooth abscess that was out here, who was trafficked. The dentist actually identified that he'd been trafficked. Hopefully you've learnt a little bit, a smattering about human trafficking and how evil it is, and how we as nurses can do something about it if we recognise it and we actually tell other people about it. And I think that's the important thing, is telling other people about it and getting to know what to do where you live, where you work. If you recognise that somebody's been trafficked, actually getting to know what to do about it. So thank you very much. Go and enjoy your cup of tea.